Welcome to the latest Watercolors Aquarium Gallery podcast, brought to you from the Aquarium Studios in downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan. My name is Ben.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Charles.
We have what should hopefully be a fun, controversial topic today. A lot of you are aware of the amendments that are happening to, let's see, I'm going to make sure that I say this just right. Currently, there is a bill in Congress that includes all kinds of stuff, but also some amendments to the Lacey Act that may have a fairly dramatic effect on those of us that keep aquarium fish, particularly those of us that like to keep rare, unique, and hard-to-find aquarium fish. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We even have a special guest. But first,
we have to do a shameless plug.
Yay, shameless plug.
Check out watercolorsaquariumgallery.com to find merch, to find products, to find some live plants, or let us know if you're looking for anything else, too. That's what you should do.
That's so watercolorsaquariumgallery.com.
Yes.
Did we say it one more time?
watercolorsaquariumgallery.com. It's really long. You can make it through it, though. I believe in you.
And if you manage to get this far without figuring out we have a podcast, you should check it out.
All right, so let's just get into it.
Yeah, this one we've been talking about doing for a little while now.
So this, as I said, this is all about the amendments to this. I don't even know what the name of this act is. Okay, you know what? I'm going to introduce our special guest, and then I bet she's probably going to be a little bit better at kind of talking about exactly what this is a little more, and then we can all get into the details of it. So our special guest today is Dr. Alisha Davidson. She has a PhD in invasive species, which is part of the motivation for these changes, or I'm going to maybe even say one of the excuses they're using for some of these changes, and we'll see how that goes. So, hey, Alisha, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good deal. We're, of course, drinking nice beer and having a fun conversation about fish stuff, because that's what we do.
Having a fun conversation about law and how that's implemented. So, new ground for us.
We should first talk about, like, does anybody know what the whole, this whole big, huge bill that already passed Congress?
Well,
right?
No.
No.
So it passed the House, not the Senate.
So
right?
So what we're dealing with right now is the Competes Act is part of, it's a bill that was voted for in the House, and there's and I'm blanking on what the name is, there's a companion bill that was passed in the Senate like a year ago.
Okay.
But there are differences between the Competes Act that was passed in the House and this other bill. So right now they're in negotiations to figure out how to coalesce them into a single thing that they can keep.
Okay.
So this may not even make the cut.
We're all hoping it doesn't.
Because the Lacey Act Amendment is on...
Them's fighting words there.
That's that's kind of why we brought you on, Alisha.
I was wondering how spicy this might get. No, so yeah, you're that's my interpretation as well, is that they're currently trying to reconcile these two bills introduced by the separate parts of the Congress, and they've named the committee. There's a smattering of Democrats and a smattering of Republicans on the committee to help finalize what most of the bill is more of a strengthening the U.S. domestic economy and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But then this part was, I don't know of who actually introduced or who kind of was responsible for this component of the House. This is in the House bill, this stuff that we're talking today.
One of the things going around about that is that it was a combination of I don't remember wait, is DeSantis a senator or a congressman?
It's beyond my pay grade.
DeSantis. Okay, so it was DeSantis and somebody who's from Florida.
Makes sense.
And then the Republican from Florida. And then a Democrat from Hawaii.
Yeah.
And they are the two that my understanding is they are the two that kind of pushed to make all this.
There is some language in common with things that the Hawaiian House representative has forwarded into things in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because those two states have been particularly affected by invasive species. So anything that kind of strengthens federal policy is, going to benefit them.
Yeah, it's hard to say that a politician from Florida shouldn't have a pretty strong stance against invasive species. I mean, they've been destroyed by stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so Alisha, you were kind of going into some of the detail about what it was.
About what this amendment, what it does.
Yeah.
Do you want? Okay, so
yeah, let's go into the heart of it. And so here's kind of where I want to go with this. Right.
Sure.
Let's talk about what this is and what its implications specifically to the aquarium hobby are, and then I want to talk a little bit about how we got here, and then let's fight. I mean, debate about
Well, like talk about
whether or not it has what we all think. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
We're not gonna fight, of course.
No, but talking about spiciness, like if you're here to represent, let's say, the perspective of the aquarium industry,
Yeah.
I think every single one of our suppliers has sent me an email that said, please help, we need to do something about this. This is going to make it so we can't keep fish anymore. Like pretty much to that degree of this is an emergency. So we have to at least
Yes, that's
see
what we
out
want
that
the other-
perspective.
the other perspective of, I mean, you're for it, right?
yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
for it because I think it is not going to. It will both support environmental protection and will not have any economic or logistical impacts, or extremely minor to the aquarium industry. So I guess I can go into sort of what it does, and then maybe we can talk about also some of like the arguments that people have been making about why it will be.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about those and why, I personally think that they're over, I don't want to say overblown. Like I want to respect everyone's opinion here, but that
You're
yeah,
allowed to say that because I agree
Yeah.
with you, by the way.
yeah, no,
Okay, cool.
so
Good. Yeah, that's exactly the perspective that we want.
okay. And then Charles, it sounds like you also have done some research, so feel free to jump in or at the end to, add anything. But so what so it basically has two main components.
Okay.
The first one is really in response to a court decision that happened in 2017, which was the Zinke versus U.S. Association of Reptile Keepers, known as U.S. ARC. And in that decision, the court basically stated that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they had previously been interpreting the Lacey Act to mean they could regulate and prohibit interstate transport of prohibited species. The reptile keepers, then they had banned a bunch of boa constrictors because they were just causing all kinds of problems in Florida. Mm-hmm. And the reptile keepers were upset about this and took them to court. And the court actually found in favor of the reptile keepers that no, the actual language, how it should be interpreted is it prevents, you can prohibit transport between like territories. So like Puerto Rico, Guam, and actually DC, like Washington, DC. But the Fish and Wildlife Service could not prohibit interstate transport. And this was a huge blow to the ability of the Fish and Wildlife Service to, protect the environment from invasive species. And so I think, that happened in 2017. So that's 5 years ago, depending on when it's actually, it was April 7th. So almost exactly 5 years ago. And so that has been like a major hole that the Fish and Wildlife Service has kind of been hamstrung in their abilities. And so the first part of this, to me, it seems like it's in response, because what it does is it clarifies the language, and it says it strikes shipment between the continental United States and inserts transport between the states. So it clarifies that, and that the Fish and Wildlife Service can, once again, how it used to do with, you guys never noticed anything, right? 2016, life was fine.
Yeah.
So basically, it just takes it back to that state of things. Which,
So that's just so that I understand it clearly. So that basically says those organisms that are restricted in one state, Fish and Wildlife Services now has the jurisdiction to say you get in trouble if you bring it across those state lines, regardless of the purpose. Is that
right? So like before, so after 2017, they could say, right, we're gonna prohibit importation into the U.S., like any state. Mm-hmm. But say something was in Florida, well, once it's in Florida, then you can send it anywhere, and the Fish and Wildlife Service can't do anything about it. Or if something was in Michigan, well, then they can send it to Florida. Or if there's some, so
that would be if it's federally prohibited, has nothing to do with whether or not it's prohibited in a state.
Right. If a state
Okay.
passes their own rules, Fish and Wildlife Service is not involved.
Do you know a specific organism, and reptiles fine, that falls under that category?
That is regulated in like a single state versus federally?
No, that's regulated federally. That they were trying to prevent being moved across state lines in 2017 and failed, and now with this language they will now be able to.
So the boa constrictors there. I think like 4 to 6 species that they had tried, and that was that was the main one.
Okay. Right. So that's snakeheads would be a perfect example. Right?
Yeah.
Like you can't bring snakeheads in the United States.
Right. And I was going to get into this sort of like what's actually currently listed. I'll say that for a bit later. It's really, it was really interesting. I was like, what actually is, because there are so many, like each state has so many species, but when you actually look at, okay, what's on the federal list? Well, it's different. So anyways, I'll save that. It's a bit of a teaser for that one. But so that's what that first part does. And to me, that's really, there's nothing, controversial about that.
Yeah,
if you're
if it's
a responsible,
Right.
For example, I have no idea what federally prohibited plants there would be, but I know what to look for on our plant lists that we can't bring into Michigan.
Yeah,
I've never even thought about
those are
that.
state
Yeah.
prohibited. Right.
Also, I will add, this doesn't even govern plants. This is wildlife only. So
It doesn't even cover coral. If you read, so when I read it specifically, it doesn't mention, it says fishes like, and then goes into some of the things that we wouldn't necessarily call fishes.
I think it said like fishes as in fish, crustacean, and mollusks.
Yeah, that's what it was. Which then wouldn't include any corals. Not
Right.
that matters, because we don't have to worry about invasive corals in Michigan that much. But anyway, I'm sorry. I keep...
No, you're fine.
interrupting.
You're fine.
Yeah.
So, and then the second part, well, they actually allow, so this is in the first part that they do, one of the other components that people have sort of taken offense to is the ability that this would give to like emergency authorization to prohibit imports. And that's really in response to the pandemic. Like if, okay, we're importing this like bat that is known to cause this like, virus, like we don't need to go through a lengthy risk assessment process, which by the way can take like months to years to try and list something. We need to stop this thing now. And so that's not, no one's going to go through the effort to emergency list like tetras. It's going to be something that's going to like hurt because they actually list like a threat to human beings. I mean, wildlife as well, but they call out humans first. So that was one of the points that people made is like, who knows what they're going to authorize in this emergency section. It gives them like way too much freedom. So that was a point. And then the second main section is that, to me, is the really interesting part, and that's brand new for the United States, is changing the way that they prohibit and decide on listing species at a federal level. So currently, anything is allowed in. And you have to go through a risk assessment, do this big long process to then like prohibit something, put it on the federal injurious wildlife list. And so what they would do is they would basically flip the burden of proof. Like rather than being innocent until proven guilty, you're guilty until proven innocent.
That's so not American.
It's so not American. But then also people are like, they're going to take away everything. But then if you look into the detail, it's like actually not as, for someone who like is really interested in protecting the environment from invasive species, it's actually not as amazing as it sounds because you can still bring in anything that you've been bringing in. So it's only things that have never been imported that you have to go through this process for.
So the vagueness of that language, though, is one of the major concerns when it comes to aquarium keepers, and particularly a store like us and people like a lot of the people that we cater to, where it's like, wow, they just discovered this really cool new apistogramma in this really remote stream in the middle of nowhere in Brazil, and we can't get it. Apistos, by the way, and that's the frequency with which that happens here is one of the reasons that I started out going, I hope it doesn't pass. Because the amount of, they use the term imported in reasonable numbers. What does that mean, right? Sometimes we're talking about...
More than minimal quantities.
Yeah, what is that?
Some of these fish maybe 50 make it into the country a year. Is that going to be sufficient?
Well, and so this was like, I'll just skip to the very end. What I was going to say of, there's so much passion, and, you guys, all the aquarium keepers out there, like, yeah, contact your legislatures and tell them what's important. What are the numbers? Like, tell them your story. Like, these are the fish, and these are how many we get in. Like, you need this, the number has to be like above 20, above 25, because the congressmen and women, they are doing their best to protect your business and protect the environment, but they don't know your business. That's not their job. And so I'll just, this is sort of like the spoiler, but...
Well, let's dance around. It's okay.
Rather than just saying, no, don't pass this, make it productive. And, so that was something that I'll maybe say that a few times during this podcast is,
Sure.
Pass it, but pass it in a way that makes sense.
See, I'm really not into the idea of a blacklist in general, and that's why I think the switch to a whitelist is actually a really good idea, in part because functionally, there's a lot of theoretical ways that a blacklist can work, but functionally you have to prove harm, and usually that means it needs to have already happened in order for you to...
Correct.
Blacklists are inherently reactive. They're not proactive.
Well, a counterpoint to that would be the recent banning of the marbled crayfish in Michigan, which it hasn't done any harm here. It was assessed and proven...
was assessed after proven harm in other states, though.
No, in Germany.
And
the one thing I would say, having been sort of involved in this, creating these watch lists that, then we pass on to people who make that kind of policy, is we are getting better at being proactive and looking at other states. But you're totally correct, is that most of these things are done retrospectively to impact.
Right. Another challenge that I have with it is the ability to enforce. And so it was let's see, it would have been right around 5 or 6 years ago, the state of Michigan tried to establish a whitelist. And the Michigan Department of Natural Resources was actually against it. So what the aquarium hobby did is they lobbied together and brought to the state legislature. The state legislature actually reached out and said, okay, how do we determine what this whitelist is? And so the aquarium hobby got together and brought them a list of 17,000 species that each DNR enforcement officer would have to be responsible for understanding when they looked at what was being imported, what was being kept, and what was being traded among the city or among the state. And the DNR officer would have to be responsible for knowing 17,000 different species of fish. I'm pretty good at fish. I don't know that I could do anywhere close to 17,000 species. So the practicality of enforcing a whitelist became exceptionally problematic. And again, it was one of those, okay, you can keep what you got. Well, who's gonna do that? How is the logistics of something like that seem like an overwhelming challenge that would kick the legs out from underneath the whole point of a program like this?
It's a good point. I mean, I think, that is something that they will, I think they do for any sort of new legislation, they do an economic analysis as part of it. And so that's something they would probably take into account. Is this even feasible?
Right.
And, and I'd have to guess, obviously I don't know the ins and outs of, federal enforcement. One, you're going to have potentially a lot fewer entry points than, say, an individual state because, mostly it's coastal. I guess it could come inland over Mexico, but I don't see many corals from Hawaii going that route.
Right.
But, and in the past, there's been this sort of level of trust of, okay, what it says on the box is what's in the box. And you're still going to have that even if you sort of flip the way that things are, regulated. And, think about it now. A lot of it comes down to people oh, I see this and I'm going to say something. And I think part of, what would happen in the future might be a similar way.
I would love to believe that, like, this is what creates thousands of decent DNR jobs for people, or is it just going to kind of, the wheels are going to fall off before that, is the faith that it's hard for us to have.
Yeah.
Well, and one other new technology that's making detection of invasive species much easier in tiny quantities is the eDNA. I think I may have mentioned that last time I was on here.
Yep.
Where you use environmental DNA and you can detect, like, if something has even been in the water through, like, fecal matter, fins, and they're developing basically like handheld tools that can like run through a water sample. And if you know, like, say you have 10 species that you're looking for, you can sort of plug those in and then it will tell you if there's any hits. Obviously, you probably like 17,000 of the ones that are allowed. You're not going to do that. But if you only have a few that aren't, which is, I'll get to later, very likely you're not going to have a ton of ones that aren't allowed. You could do that. Mm-hmm. So there are, it's becoming more sophisticated than just like looking and having to memorize the taxonomy.
True. Okay.
All right, what you got?
All right, so one of the things that the aquarium hobby is reeling from was the banning of aquarium collection in Hawaii a couple of years ago. So you cannot get anything endemic to Hawaii in the aquarium hobby anymore, right? Shut it down.
It's it's the captive stuff that you would, right? That's what it's transitioned to.
Well, those
in
that
from Hawaii
are
or
capable, the captive breeding programs currently for marine fish aren't there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and so any of these, they're being fished, and you're taking out the big ones that are the reproducers. Okay.
Yeah.
Frankly,
Okay.
it means that
I got it.
that probably as a whole, the industry is getting from less sustainable fisheries instead of from Hawaii instead.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so Hawaii has previously was touted as the model of sustainability. The science was all done by reputable scientists through, a lot of it was the Hawaiian Oceanographic Institute or what's the big one in Waikiki, the one associated with the Waikiki Aquarium. I can't remember what that is. But anyway, that was who did the research. The research, a lot of it was funded by the aquarium industry, but it was still done by the right kind of scientists and the right kinds of people. A couple of, I'm going to call them wannabe do-gooders, started this campaign, a smear campaign against the aquarium industry, which, by the way, little sidebar here, it's easy to do a smear campaign against the aquarium industry because we screw up a lot of things, right? But anyway, they did this smear campaign against the aquarium industry, and they got a court to throw out the data by these very reputable scientists because it was funded by the aquarium industry.
Okay.
And saying, pending an environmental impact study, we're going to cease the collection of marine ornamental aquarium fish until a proper study is done. Who's going to fund that other than the aquarium industry, right? And so that was what they ran into. Some of the pamphlets that these organizations were throwing around included pictures, this big caption, "The aquarium industry is raping our reefs," was a quote. And there was a picture of a fish called a discus fish, which is a South American freshwater fish, right? It wasn't even a fish. And the amount of, I could go into like 15 different examples of how they used propaganda to push this through, even though it really, like I said, it was a model of sustainability, and all the scientific data was there saying, yeah, the aquarium industry is not having a dramatic impact on, or is not having a negative impact on the population of yellow tangs, that's the poster child, right? That's one of the most famous marine aquarium fish. They're only found in Hawaii.
Sure.
Right? And there was no data backing up. Yeah, but I snorkeled here and I used to see more yellow tangs than I do now. So see, So anyway, that was a little long version of what we're reeling from is that went through, even though the science didn't back it up.
So
Well-
there's a couple of counterpoints to that, though. I don't think that would have passed through if it was in a federal court, though. Because the only reason it
Fine.
passed through in Hawaii was because it was a state court where the final decision was based on tourism.
Agreed.
B, yeah, that was unfair, but this is.
The intimidating part is to have no voice in the subject.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a foregone conclusion that the aquarium industry needs more regulation. I would never argue with that fact. Like,
I
not
agree.
being regulated is not the solution. It's how do we trust that this is the thing that's going to treat it respectfully? That's the question to me.
Yeah.
Because, to finish the point, though, I got this quote from Susan Williams from the University of California, who specializes in the ecology and conservation of seaweeds and seagrass beds, also known as, marine invasive species are really important to her.
Uh-huh.
Globally, the aquarium trade has contributed to a third of the world's worst aquatic and invasive species.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to take very seriously as hobbyists.
That's no question. Yeah, absolutely.
So are you guys more concerned about having currently traded species being restricted, or the inability to get new species?
Inability to get new species. Well,
For me, it's both.
yeah. So if the whole idea behind this is its effect on invasive species, and the act is allowing trade of current aquatic species, the ones that we really have to worry about, they're already here. And so we're not regulating the problem. We're regulating unforeseen new problems that have a smaller likelihood of success, or a smaller likelihood of actually becoming a problem, because many of those invasive species, right? Like, for example, we can look at Florida and we can see the world record pacu with the world record clown knifefish and the world record. I had one other that I was going to come up with that I can't think of. Anyway, those two, right? That's good enough. The world record pacu was caught in Florida, right? That's an aquarium fish. Yes, we did that. That aquarium hobby is responsible for the fact that there are pacu in Florida now. Clown knives, we are responsible for that. We did that.
I mean, the lionfish, is that another one?
Lionfish is another one. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
We did that. But those are already here. Mm-hmm. And many of them that could potentially be a problem, they're already here. And so we're addressing, okay, but no more new problems can be brought in. But the problems are already here.
Well, I mean, there are certainly enough problems here, but the fact that, the statement that there's no new problems is not accurate, because there are, new species being imported. And then you have the added complexity of climate change. So for us northern states, something was introduced 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It failed. But guess what? It's just a little warmer now. And guess what? It overwinters. And they're finding these examples are like plants, like water hyacinth and water lettuce.
Yeah.
They definitely cannot overwinter in Michigan. But guess what? They're finding them in the exact same places every year. So you're actually the fact that, you say that likelihood is lower. I would argue that it's higher with new species that have, there's a broader environmental compatibility with climate change.
I mean, I think probably you're right. You're right. Because what I'm focusing on the little one, I'm focusing on the little ones that are important to me.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
I'm looking at it as too small of a picture.
Yeah.
And I go back right to epistogrammas and tetras. And if we find a new tetra or a new epistogramma species, it's not going to survive in Michigan. It's not going to overwinter here.
But that starts targeting what the real fear is to me, is that I think it's both too strong and not strong enough. Like, I don't think that it will attack the things that I think are big problems. Like, is this what's going to get feeder goldfish out of stores and stop people from selling common plecos? It really doesn't seem like it. But will it stop me from getting Betta mahakiensis, which is going to go extinct because of habitat destruction? Maybe. And so is it just going to push out stores like us and keep the big box stores, which are responsible for most of the damage, doing exactly whatever they feel like?
Yeah, so I think it's a good time now to talk about what is on this list.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you guys know what's on the federal list?
I don't.
So
No.
the list Lacey Act has been around for 120 years. And I thought, maybe there's like a bunch of tropical stuff, like to protect Florida, even though it would be like harming Michigan because it can't even survive in Michigan. And so we're sort of like, it's unfair, right, to the northern states. So I had a quick look. And so for fish, 6 of those are the carps, Asian carp, bighead carp, right? To me, that seems fair enough.
Yeah.
There's 8 miscellaneous fish. I'll read them off. Eurasian minnow, stone Morocco, European perch, Nile perch, roach, amber sleeper, and a zander, which are pretty, they're all like brown, gray, mostly big predators. Obviously not the minnow, but nothing.
Not really aquarium fish.
No aquarium fish. Then we go on to snakehead. Again, not really that great.
Okay, wait.
I want snakehead.
Okay.
So the genus Channa includes, I think it's 39 different species,
Yeah.
and 6 of them are problematic.
And the rest are like my dream aquarium
there's some
fish. They would
really
be
cool
so
ones
perfect.
That are super tropical, and there's just no way. They have just as much chance of surviving in Michigan and doing damage as a tetra does.
I'm not even really complaining because I get it, but that is one that I'm like, if they weren't though. There's some really pretty
I know.
snakeheads.
There's Channa and there's like a parachanna. Like there are.
Yeah.
But like
So-
again, I don't know, but maybe that's related to again the identification issue.
I think so.
And will they look similar enough? I don't know.
Like, I get it. That's one they can't even mess around, but I still want it.
Okay. So that's fair. The other big group is salmon. Because a pathogen risk. If they have an import health certificate, you can bring them in. It's mostly to protect people who eat them, like us. Right. And then the final thing is walking catfish, which can move over the ground to get to new bodies of water.
Yes. Cool.
So that is
I had one
all
in 1989.
of the fish on the federal list.
Yeah.
So, and then, don't forget mollusks, crustaceans. Zebra and quagga mussel. Mitten crab, and this crayfish called the yabby crayfish. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't affect plants. That's it, folks. So to me, I'm like, why are we even worrying about this? Because it has been around for so long. And if this is what's on the list right now, and if you're worried about new species, you're not going to be missing out on this like Amazon. It's ones that are
conversion from a blacklist to a whitelist. That's the challenge. So all of the stuff that's already here is going to automatically go onto the whitelist.
It doesn't mean it'll stay on though.
Right.
Because now they have to prove non-harm.
I agree. But now if like they go discover some new species of apistogramma in some crazy jungle reach in the middle of northern Peru, we can't get it.
Well, yes, you can. You just have to do an easy risk assessment. I can do it for you. That's what my PhD was in. They're very easy. And you know what you're going to say? Look, there's all these, cogeneric species, same genus. They're not causing any problems. This one isn't either. And I mean, obviously I can't say for certain, but the likelihood is that it's going to be allowed in. You might have to wait a little bit. But to me, that kind of, a little bit of sacrifice for the greater good. Okay, I mean, you guys want to be responsible. This is the small sacrifice that you're going to make to protect the other water bodies in the wild.
What about undescribed species?
Well, then just collect them and describe them.
That's
I mean, if you want to import it, you got to have it, right? You can describe it.
No, I mean, I can show you our latest wholesale lists, and there'll be 25 different fish on there that aren't described yet.
At least.
At least.
At
Like
least.
they're not given a species name?
They
don't have
they don't
one.
have a species name yet.
So, like, example of a recent fish we got in was a Pistogramma CF, quotation marks, Agassizi, collection location, Tefe, color, variety, redback.
Sure. So, I mean, you'd go through the same process. Just because it doesn't have a species name doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and you can't like document how big it is, what it eats, like what it does to the habitat. I mean, like that is not going to, impact whether or not it gets in.
So is this
I mean, I guarantee you it's in the process of being named right now. There's just a bit of a lag.
right?
All right. So for perspective, the lorcarid, which is one of the big families of suckermouth catfish, actually, the Placostomus is is one of the lorcarid catfish. The aquarium hobby and some of the scientists involved in the aquarium hobby developed a system for identifying lorcarids because so many of them are being discovered so quickly that they can't get described fast enough. It's called an L number system. The genus Corydoras, which is another, you guys have corycats.
Yes, we do.
Right?
Yep.
The Cory people said that's a good idea because we're discovering new species of Corydoras faster than we can describe them. So now there are CW identification numbers for Corydoras species. And the Apisto people are starting to look at the same kind of thing.
Hyphosabricons do that. Sualia's hillstream loaches do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're being discovered that fast. And like L333s have been in the hobby for 15 years. And they're still not described.
They are described.
Dang it, I was trying to make one up.
They actually,
Okay.
somebody has been doing like a whole bunch of work on that in the last 5 years.
Okay.
Not to eliminate your point,
Right.
but it is exciting.
There are many of them that have been
Yes.
in the hobby as an L number for an extended period of time. Of course, I don't have the perfect example.
Right,
Amy's going to
right.
shut me down if I come up with those. So to say, don't worry, they're about to be described. It's happening. There's too many of them in some of these places that with new discoveries
So,
Right.
to
So, I mean,
describe them that quickly. And part of the reason that we care about that is those people that go and collect those fish are being encouraged by organizations like Project Paiva to care about where they're collecting those fish from. And to find something new drives revenue into that region in a sustainable way with the programs that are in place to do that. If that motivation is taken away, what is it going to do to the income potential of those people trying to collect those fish and bring them into the hobby? And now all of a sudden, it hasn't been described yet, so sorry.
Well, again, this is something that, one, when you contact your senators and, congressmen, women,
Yeah.
is talk about this. Okay. There's these undescribed species that, they're important for conservation in their, native habitat, and you need to think about this and what are you going to do about it? And, that is something that's constructive that could come out of this conversation that hobbyists with some time, the other point I would make on that is a lot of times, like, for example, the currently listed species, like the risk assessment is done not for like each individual species, it's done for like the genus. And so for your example, you could potentially have like, well, all of these, Corydoras, like, they're all, everything in the genus, even if it's not described yet, could come in. Again, I don't know how they're going to handle that, but that's something like all these questions that I, can't answer or no one can answer is something that you need to like point out and say, you need to consider this when you're,
I
you're
didn't
doing
realize
it.
it was done on the genus level.
That's why China as a genus is like.
I do have a question though.
Because rather than listing
Yeah.
like the whole, they do risk assessment for like the whole genus rather than the individual species, because either they look similar or they have similar, characteristics that would make them harmful.
Yeah.
So did you say that, like, there's sort of a standardized way to handle these kinds of applications, or at least something that's been established. Did you walk through, or can you walk through maybe what type of information is typically expected? Like, would we be asked to list out, like, let's say, what type of habitat it comes from, where they've been recorded specifically, what kind of information makes something able to be brought in?
Right. So, I mean, first of all, the aquarium industry, the onus wouldn't be on you to do this. I mean, one, it's a conflict of interest.
Right.
And, it takes your time. So the Fish and Wildlife Service, they've got a variety of assessment frameworks that they use. Like, they have one that's a quick one. It's called an ecological, it's an ERSS, and I can never remember the full name. And they, you can look up online. I've looked at hundreds of them. They look at, so they use like modeling to compare the environmental, like the climate match between, they can look for the Great Lakes, they can do the whole country, between, the U.S. and then where they come from. Okay, like how it's basically, it looks like a heat map, right? So if it's like blue and cold, okay, we're good because there's not gonna be a lot of overlap. If it's like red, well, then they're gonna live here. Then they look at, has it had any impacts anywhere like else in the world? Is it like high on the trophic cascade of like, is it a predator? It's gonna like eat everything in the water. There's a whole variety of questions that they look at to then assess risk. And the people that would be doing that would be potentially, so the Fish and Wildlife Service, they sometimes employ like, scientists who have trained in risk work, or biologists who know either the genus or, they're familiar with that kind of fish, or, like maybe like this group, I don't know, like the one nonprofit you mentioned, that provides like work to people in other
Project
places.
Piaba, yeah.
Like maybe like Project Piaba like takes money and pays people to like, they collect some data if we don't know about their habitat, or like one of the things is like fecundity, right? Like how many eggs they lay, like the number, like a ton of eggs is a really good predictor of being invasive because it's just a ton of them and chances of, right.
Yeah.
So that's actually for mollusks. That's like, in some models, it's like the only criteria they use to
Really?
protect invasiveness is like the fecundity. Yeah. So
Do they lay 10 eggs or 10,000?
right.
Or 100 million.
Right. It's like a log scale at some point.
Terrifying.
Yeah. So, I mean, those like sort of those risk assessment frameworks, that's actually something that I work a lot on. And
Okay.
there's a lot of really good ones that have been very well vetted. So
So it's not as if we're covering new ground there.
Oh no. And the other thing that I feel like we're maybe sort of missing is like the people making these laws, like they're not like, and being an environmentalist is not their first job. Like their first job is to get reelected, and to get reelected, they want to keep people happy and like businesses happy. So I really don't think that they're out to get the, aquarium industry.
Is this where I say, are you talking about corporations or are you talking about small businesses? Because some people have a lot more dollars to vote with than we do, and they only carry 50 different types of fish. We have over 200 probably in stock.
Right. I mean, how much of your business are those like 5 fish, or like the ones that are undescribed? Like what percent of your like sales is
the undescribed ones?
Sure.
Of probably 5 to 10%.
Right. So I mean, significant.
Yeah.
Or at least ones that if you're talking about fish that you wouldn't see at the top 3 per volume places to buy fish, probably 50 to 80% of our stock is that.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when I start to get a little sweaty about it.
Yeah.
Is that we don't have a lot of swing for people who are looking to look good,
Right.
like politicians.
Okay, so really, all of this has to do with what kind of risk these creatures that we so care about and so want to keep, like what is the real risk to the environment? Like, is it really a problem?
Well, I mean, so in the Great Lakes alone, there have been 23 invasive species that have been attributed to the aquarium trade.
23?
Yes. And I don't have those off the top of my head. I don't have that list.
We know the dojo loach. Weather
Yes.
loach.
Yep. That's definitely one of them. There's a couple of mollusks that have been attributed. Goldfish.
Goldfish for sure. Would that include some plants, probably, in that statistic?
That would, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So then we've got Eurasian milfoil, we've got
heaps.
Anacris, and
probably Kabamba. It's on there.
yeah.
Mermaid
Hydrilla.
weed?
Yep.
Hydrilla. Brazilian waterweed. Agariodensa. Do you have any agarias? Yep.
Yeah.
So aquarium, I believe that includes like the pond. So water hyacinth, yellow floating heart, yellow flag iris. Yeah, there's
European trogbit.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and then in the U.S., so over the last decade, 2,500 species have been imported, and they estimate that about 13% of those could cause harm.
13%?
Yeah.
13%.
13% of species or
300.
13% of individuals?
That'd be species.
Okay.
Yep. And I mean, the reality is, and this also will make you guys breathe a sigh of relief, is that, scientists and the Fish and Wildlife Service, so I spoke with, she's kind of like the head of the invasive species. She's like, yeah, it's just me doing this. Yeah. So one of the reasons that those species haven't really been assessed is, one, industry pushback. Like there's a lot of money in making sure that the new species don't get added. Mm-hmm. And there's just not anyone to do it. Like there's no time or money to fund the sort of risk assessments that are because, again, this is also should be reassuring is it's not just oh yeah, that one looks bad. It just ate my goldfish. I'm going to get rid of it. So it's a really rigorous process that you have to find cited literature, and it takes a while. Often there's peer review with other experts. And so it's, it's an intense process. So again, nothing is going to be added on a whim. And that's one of the reasons also that there's so many that, you mentioned earlier that, everything's here that's could cause bad problems is already here. And that's, yeah, things are still being imported that could cause problems, and they just haven't been released in the right spot yet, is the other answer.
So I get that. My point had to do a lot more with the fact that maybe this is where okay, obviously I'm just going up, the language of it is the challenge, and although the ideal behind it has merit and is all good things, what it's going to accomplish, what it feels like it's going to accomplish isn't going to save or protect that much. Because if we're saying if it's already here, it's okay. Well, when it comes to aquarium fish, the ones that are going to do damage, they're here. The new ones that we're finding, the new ones that we're bringing in, mostly are little stuff. Which I think we can agree mostly when it comes to fish, the little stuff is usually not where the big problems are. It's the big stuff. Right?
Well, zebra mussels. They came in as a veliger in ballast water.
Of course there's going to be examples against
But
that.
zebra mussels, even just as an example, are more than twice the size of any freshwater mollusk we keep in aquariums.
Yeah. But the zebra mussels weren't us. Let's just
They
make
were,
that clear.
yeah,
That was
for
not
one,
the
they
aquarium
weren't us.
industry,
That was
right?
not you. But I'm also saying, okay, obviously zebras are an extreme as far as damage, but say you even have a more average species that caused, hundreds of thousands or, $1 million of damage. If you could prevent one of those, surely this is worth it, right?
Yeah. Apple snails would probably be the aquarium appropriate example. Those are still regularly traded and can be very destructive.
I think what I'm trying to say is I don't disagree with anything that you're saying there, but this whole big thing that's causing all of these issues, that's causing all this uprising in the aquarium hobby, isn't going to address the problem that's already here. And yes, it may help prevent something unforeseen coming in that we don't know about yet. But there are so many that are here that we already know are problems that this isn't addressing. So we're doing all of this work that's not going to really fix most of the issue.
Sure.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and there are, for example, there's a program, it's called EcoStar, that's like potentially being developed that would rate species that are currently being sold in aquarium stores as far as like low risk, moderate risk, high risk, kind of like seafood that you eat in a store. You know, you get the green, yellow, red. Mm-hmm. There's efforts to doing that. Like, this is not the only thing being done in the world of invasive species. And, you know, one single bill can't do everything. And a lot of that kind of stuff, it's like a legislative amendment is not an appropriate way to accomplish that. You know, it's done more at like a state level or a nonprofit level, universities. And so, you know, to argue that, well, just because it doesn't fix the whole problem, you shouldn't do it. To me, that's a silly argument because that, you know, like, oh, well, I'm not going to clean the kitchen because like it'll get dirty again. The whole house is dirty. There's no point in just cleaning one thing because the rest is already just a mess. So,
but if we're going to regulate the aquarium hobby to try and protect the natural ecosystems, shouldn't we regulate and go after where the big problems are, not where they're not? Which the introduction of, like, particularly talking about the genus level, the generas are probably already here. We're not finding all that many new generas.
Well, you just said that you're finding like all kinds of new fish, like so many you can't even.
At the species level.
So
yeah.
Other than things that are being split into new genera.
Yeah. So here's my problem with this entire discussion is that when something like this happens, hobbyists as a whole have three options that they can do with it.
Right.
Number one is look at it and say, it's just a hobby, whatever happens, happens. And for people like you, me, and Amy, that's clearly not an option.
Right.
Number two is you can fight it every step of the way, try to shoot it down, and prove to the world that what you do now is fine. Well, the reality is that it's not. And that's not productive at all because, like, I don't even remember what they're called now anymore because, like, 2 weeks ago they announced the name change. But PJAC is not the type of association that I am very comfortable being affiliated with personally. And the way that they approach this entire thing, I think is entirely wrong. And then the third option is you can ask yourself, what can I do to be better? And actions are a defendable position. And so I think by participating in the discussion of how to implement something like this is productive. I think the entire conversation is not constructive when the entire conversation is whether or not we should do this legislation, because legislation like this has passed in other countries and it works. Is it going to get us all the way there? No. Is it going to get us a step in the right direction? Probably.
Most of the opposing organizations also oppose every pet industry regulation.
Exactly, and that's my point.
Right.
And we need regulation, guys. We really need it.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, you know, I sort of two analogies thinking about this issue. I mean, one, I have two little kids. Shout out to Ginny and Evie again. You know, they want new toys all the time, and they want them now. But you know what? They just can't have whatever toy they want because they have to share them with other toys. They have to think about other kids. You know, maybe that toy is made out of plastic and lead, and it's not really a great toy to have. And so, you know, surely we can be more mature than children and think, well, just because we want this doesn't mean we should get to have it. And the other analogy that, again, thinking about it, is, you know, the sort of fear-mongering that I feel like has happened with some of these industry groups. Like, they're going to shout down every aquarium store. You're going to lose your livelihood.
Mm-hmm. I think I've heard somebody even say, this may be word for word, but keeping pets other than cats and dogs may be a thing of the past.
Yeah, I think I saw that as well. To me, it's, you know, it's kind of similar to the whole like gun control lobby. in that, they're saying, they're going to take away all your guns. Like they're going to take away all your fish. And, similar to the gun control, it's like, I know plenty of hunters who are totally pro gun control because they're not going to take away your like hunting shotguns. They're going to take away the AK-47s that no one needs to have. And this is a similar thing. They're not going to take away like the Tetras and all the really cool little guys. They're going to take away the snakeheads and the ones that shouldn't be here. So,
and I'm going to out myself even more harder in this podcast than I already have because I feel like I have an unpopular opinion on this entire podcast. But I'm also a gun-touting American that is pro-gun control, so let's go with that too. Just make everyone really mad at me.
Maybe I'm going to out myself as like too young for this conversation where I just keep coming back to but if they're not actually going to ban the things that are problems, then what's even the point to begin with? Until something takes away fish that are in every single chain store and grocery store that sells fish, why are we even bothering?
So part of that's what's intriguing to me about this is that most of the wording right now is pertaining to what will and will not be grandfathered in. And this is, like, I will admit, this is speculation, but this does set up a framework to change entirely how we do risk assessments and put things on the list in the future. Like, for example, I'm just going to use goldfish because it's the easy one to shoot at.
Yeah.
It's the one I'm raging about.
Yeah.
So,
So like, that's one that would be near to impossible to get a good risk assessment to be put on a blacklist. But to be taken off of whitelists, that would be easier. Theoretical.
There are all kinds of people out there and so I want to preface some of this a little bit. Alisha actually asked me if she thought it would be okay to use the gun control analogy, and I guarantee you there are some people out there going, what the heck? Right. So let me just take a step back with that. Okay. By the way, completely agreeing with you. The gun advocates all say if Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so or Ms. So-and-so is responsible with a fully automatic AK-47, it is completely true that should not be a problem. Right? Should not be a problem. And it is completely true that person aquarist with a marbled crayfish, a snakehead, and a dojo loach shouldn't be a problem. It should be just fine for a responsible aquarium keeper to keep those species. No problem. But guess what?
Someone ruined it for everyone.
Exactly.
Thousands of people ruined it for everyone.
Exactly. There are established populations of dojo loaches in a stream in Michigan, right?
Yeah.
The common plecos are eroding the canal systems in Florida. Marbled crayfish got taken off before they became really a problem in Michigan, and thank goodness they did. Mm-hmm. Right?
But so, lionfish are still devastating the Caribbean.
They are devastating the Caribbean. Thank you.
Well, then if you want to, really have like a quantitative
let's go there.
Answer to that.
Yep.
So I will preface this with this number is not just aquarium releases. This includes all invasive species. And yet though, doing economic estimates of damage is extremely difficult, and they tend to lowball it because, how do you put a number on that feeling you get when you go diving for the first time and you see like a fully intact reef or ecosystem? How do you value that? So anyways,
one of my favorite things in the entire world, by the way.
I know, that's why I said it, because I was like, this is going to get a reaction. 35 billion with a B dollars. So, that is also important. Your livelihood is important, and yet, every action has a reaction.
That money's the only part of it we can get back.
Right. And the other thing is that, so again, invasive species management is divided into sort of those two parts, like the prevention and then like the control, like when something is established. And, you know, your point that, well, there's so many current problems like this doesn't address. Well, sure, this doesn't maybe address the ones that are already there. And that is being addressed in other efforts like the eco story I mentioned. But this really gets to that prevention part. And the thing with, you know, like saying having a waiting period to import some new species, okay, that's temporary. Once a new species is introduced, like that's forever. Like eradicating, it basically never happens. Like it makes headline news when it does.
Right.
So this is not something that we can just reverse. You know, invasive species are irreversible.
Yeah. Can you think of an example in Michigan that an invasive species was eradicated?
I mean, they're like population eradication. So, and so things that are like really visible, for example, red swamp crayfish has been found in a few locations. And like when that happens, the DNR is just like out there and in force, and, you know, they trap them, and and that's what Eagle has done a few plants where, okay, yeah, this is like eradicated in this pond. But again, it's like putting out fires, right? It's just like, when is the next one going to happen? And slowly, so for things like European frogbit, like it's transitioning from a species that like, say if it's found, there's a rapid response effort to like get rid of it, trying to like control it and not have it be established in Michigan. Like it's slowly transitioning to more of like okay, like it's here, we're going to try and prevent it spreading. So, you know, that happens slowly, but like you get enough introductions and they just don't have the resources to do it. And you have enough, you know, people spreading it. And, you know, one of the big differences, so Australia and New Zealand, they have the, that sort of a clean list approach. Again, we can also, another topic is how we talk about these lists. And now with, sort of increased awareness of how we label things, that maybe white and black isn't appropriate and something more like clean and dirty or authorized or unauthorized is more appropriate. So that's why I use, they use that clean list approach.
My husband is a programmer, and he's sitting next to me giving me looks every time we say black list and white list, because they've all switched to allow list and deny list.
So yep, something like that would be great. So where was I? So Australia and New Zealand, you know, they take this allow list approach, and you know, and having lived there really is a more like community oriented mindset. You know, whether it's like universal healthcare, where it's not so much like me and mine, it's us and ours. I mean, they have a great lifestyle. They have a very healthy aquarium industry. There's plenty of species being traded. It's just that sort of different worldview. And so, you know, it's hard in the U.S. That's how we're used to being. And
Yeah. So let's talk about how we got here a little bit.
I have some statistics and some information on aquarium releases.
Okay, good.
Hit it, Charles. You've been bubbling on this stuff for a long time.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to start off with a piece of information from a paper called Beyond Ballast Water, Aquarium and Ornamental Trades as Sources of Invasive Species in Aquatic Ecosystems. This is a paper from 2004. Yes, I know that's almost 20 years ago. Deal with it.
It's still being cited. I'm pretty sure I've used it recently.
Just assume it has only gotten worse.
So, aquarium release is the largest source of introduced fish in Florida and second largest nationally. Second only behind stocking and bait release.
Right.
And so I actually managed to find, it's called Freshwater Aquarium Hobbyists and Invasive Species in the Houston, Galveston region. This was a survey done in 2011. And it assessed the availability potential, release potential of species, and they tried to quantify what makes a person more or less likely to release a fish.
Whether they have it or don't have it.
So what they managed to find was the number one, the preferred choice for getting rid of a fish when you want to move on is either trading it or selling it, but releasing it into the wild was second, and very close, within a few percent.
Yeah.
And when they asked people, they would give follow-up questions. When they asked people why, they would get quotes like, "It gives fish a fighting chance," or "If they survived, then they earned it," yada, yada, yada. And the people who release fish into the wild said things about how they think it benefits nature because it adds biodiversity, that nature is always changing, it prevents extinction. Yeah. All this stuff. People will actually drive long distance for quote unquote what they think is an appropriate body of water, like hundreds of miles.
Whatever they have decided that is.
Yeah. Factors that increase release potential include quote unquote Darwinistic values. That's,
Eat or beat.
Yeah. Emotional attachment to the fish or buy at big box stores. Factors that decrease your release potential are value the ecosystem stability, view environment as a public resource, not a private one, and this is their quotes, not mine, and I'm serious. Serious aquarist and access to a local fish store.
Fair enough. And you know what a lot of local fish stores do? Take rescues. We will take anything that anybody wants to bring us as long as we can physically house it safely. And
it's legal for us to house.
Yes, of course. If it's not legal for us to house, then we will happily take it and safely dispose of it for you.
Yeah.
But we have 20 goldfish downstairs right now who are just waiting for the right new home.
And 6 or 8 common plecos.
That's funny. So yeah, the talking about the changing vectors, that's definitely, as ballast water management has improved, that has fallen off as a vector. And you mentioned bait. So this Lacey Act, like we talked about all the species that were currently listed and how really they weren't aquarium species. It's because this is not like going after the aquarium industry. Like a lot of those like bait species, like they would be addressed by this change as well. So it's not like, just keep in mind, like this is not like naming out aquaria, right? It's like bait. I mean, originally I think Lacey Act, it was like a poaching. It was a response to people poaching and across state lines. And so, not only would it help the sort of invasives in the aquarium industry, it would help the bait industry, which is another big, source of invasives.
Charles, you brought up some just fantastic points with that paper. That how did we get here?
Yeah.
We've had some pretty intense and passionate, angry, frustrated talks on
Sometimes
this
with each
podcast
other.
with each other, but also about one of my favorite phrases when it comes to the aquarium industry is, "What do you mean you don't want to do it right?" Mm-hmm. Right. And I see on my Facebook feed there's a fellow aquarium fish seller who regularly sells fish that don't belong in the hobby, and I saw a little debate on there about, well, if he wants to sell them, it's he's just trying to make a living, and it's up to the people that buy them. Like, just stop buying them. Like, no, just stop selling them.
Yeah.
Stop
If it's
providing
wrong,
them.
then the market will regulate it.
Yeah.
Sure, that's what usually happens.
The big box stores come in. I can't believe that came up in such a tangible way. That, okay, we've always had this issue with, why is it that you can go buy common plecos, pacus, and iridescent sharks at just about every big box store in the country, and none of those 3 fish belong in the hobby, and they sell like crazy at big box stores. And Charles just kind of illustrated that point. A lot of us listening, a lot of us talking here, we know better, but no one else does. So if this kind of legislation goes through, it is going through because people in the industry decided to not do it right, decided to do it wrong.
One of the things that was really fascinating to me about looking into this is that hobbyists as a whole seem to care a lot about what I'll describe as upstream effects of sustainability in the hobby, as in, like, they care a lot about sustainability at the end of collection.
I only want captive bred fish, that kind of stuff.
But there isn't a discussion about downstream effects of sustainability in the hobby. So, like, where does the fish end up, and what's the effect of that?
Yeah.
And the hobby cannot, and I'm saying this definitively, and anyone can fight me on this, cannot state it's sustainable if you're not sustainable in both directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And, I don't know how long you guys normally go, but you're talking about, how did we get here? And, how do we do it right? And I don't know if we want to start talking about, where do we go from here? How do we, what
I
are
think it's a
some
good
of
time for
the,
that.
well, and specifically to this Lacey Act Amendment, what are we going to tell listeners, to tell their legislators? What are some important things that we need to communicate to most effectively leverage? Because this kind of stuff doesn't come around every day. This is an opportunity. And how can we, make it work for everyone?
If we just shoot this down without talking about it, we've lost an opportunity to be better as a hobby. And that is something that we really need to address.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I had initially suggested talking to them about, what are the minimum numbers? What do those look like for a local fish store? The unspecified or, undefined fish issue. So those are, these are two, and you guys really know your industry better than I do. What if you had your senator and, House of Representatives person right here, what would we tell them?
What's your elevator pitch to the Senate?
Yeah,
And what it
keeping in
can't
mind,
be is, please leave us alone. We don't want you to do this. It has to be tangible. This is what we need from you.
I mean, most industries are regulated. It's not like Aquarium is the only one that gets told a little bit what to do and what not to do. So keeping in mind, we're kind of focused around, we can't fix everything. We can't fix what's being sold in the box stores that shouldn't be in people's tanks. But it's regarding, Lacey Act as far as, if we're going to talk around what's being imported, how do we define that? What is what kind of notification, how long do you guys need before, a 6 months notice, or, how long, do these risk assessments, do they need to be done in a year or less? What percentage of your sales, like I asked earlier, what percentage is these really small numbers that they're, because a lot of people would think, well, it's probably just some weird person with 1,000-gallon tank who wants something no, it's actually 5 to 10%. And maybe attaching a monetary value, well, yeah, it's only 5 to 10%, but also they sell for way more. And so the actually profit is more 15 to, or, so that kind of thing, telling your listeners.
It gets people looking. It keeps. All right. So I've been in this hobby for a really long time, and it keeps people like me interested. What's something new? What's something interesting? And so that's one of the things. That's one of the things to consider. And so, when we're talking about what do we want to hear from our senators, what we do in the room, let's stop with the vague language. Okay, you're telling us minimum or reasonable quantities. What does that mean? If we're talking about the quantities of goldfish being traded across state lines, that's in the gajillions. Right, but if we're talking about
our supplier gives discounts for if you get 1,000 or more in an order.
Yeah, but if we're talking, we recently got in our latest shipment of F1 Altum Angels, which were very.
I thought about that when I was thinking about this. Yeah,
yeah, they're not imported very often because they don't do well being imported. But finally, we've got F1s. There's been, I don't know, maybe 1,000 total in the United States. Maybe it's 2,000. I don't know exactly what that number is. But compared to, let's just say something that's on the slightly rare side, let's go with Apistogramma penduro, which is a relatively common apisto, which apistos aren't a common genus, but they're relatively common. But it's a much greater number than the Altums. So what I'm getting at there is, let's hear when they're saying reasonable numbers, let's hear what that means. Because that could be a very different number for Altum Angels than it is for some kind of tetra.
Well, I think the problem is that it says to be defined, so I think the discussion shouldn't be around what does that mean. It should be what number do you want that to be?
Yeah,
Like,
this is what
yeah.
it means to us.
Yeah.
I think about stuff like for me, it gets me really nervous about things like, let's talk about licorice gouramis, where there are a dozen or two different species. They only come out of one specific swamp in Borneo, and in that part of the world, those swamps are shrinking by the day because they're being developed by people who have no other choice but to develop those areas.
Like the palm oil plantations, by the
Yeah,
way, guys.
lovely.
Yeah.
So these are less than 50 for some of these species, less than 20 maybe even. And the only thing standing between some of them and complete extinction is that there's a couple of freaky geeks in Europe and the US who are desperate to keep them alive.
Yeah, so maybe something that you say is we need to pay special attention to species with conservation value.
Yeah.
You know, these are the ones
Yeah.
that the aquarium industry is sort of protecting and sheltering, you know, and you need to call those out.
Yeah, and there are a few that are genuinely extinct in the wild that are kept alive by interest.
Some really common,
Yeah.
surprisingly common fish that they only exist in the aquarium hobby. They don't exist in the wild anymore. They only exist here.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of invasive species plants that are like endangered in their native habitats in Europe.
Well, I mean, that doesn't help me at all.
No, but I'm saying it's funny, you know,
It is
things
funny.
do well in
Yeah.
different places.
Yep.
And
I think part of
The way of the world.
I think part of the saving grace, though, is the idea that like maybe we don't need to look at it at species level, but maybe at a genus level.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if we can look at like Paris fermentis as a genus,
Mm-hmm.
licorice gouramis, that would be. I think that would be a much more viable number. Like if we could say, let's say, 1,000.
Yeah.
That was actually a game changer for me. As soon as you said, Alisha, that the risk assessment is usually done on the genus level, not the species level. That was
Like,
well, okay.
well, then that's way less of a big
yeah,
deal.
it really like that was huge, right? And so that's a little bit where the specifics of the language are so important because of things like that, right? The protection of licorice gouramis, aquarists start to care about that. And if we're protecting licorice gourami habitat, we're protecting orangutan habitat. And vice versa, right? If we're protecting orangutan habitat, we're protecting licorice gourami habitat. And so as soon as we can start to make things go, okay, guys, settle down. It's not that big of a deal, and here's why. Well, if we have the specifics, if we've got those details, then we can start to go, all right, that makes sense. If someone says imported on reasonable numbers, and we're talking about, you know, food, fish, and bait versus licorice gouramis, it's hard to see how some congressperson in Washington is going to go, 742, click, done. Okay, move on to the next thing, right? But let's get with that. Let's get to some of those specifics so that we can stop freaking out.
So if you're an industry person like we are, I have records of every freshwater fish we've received, well, and saltwater fish, to be honest, received over the last 5 years. Maybe I need to compile that data and send it on. Maybe everyone else in the industry should too.
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I'm sure they would love to have. And, you know, they get blamed for doing these sort of things, but it's like, how much can you blame them if no one tells you, you know, how to do it or your own perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you go through Florida and look at, you know, the world record pacu being caught down there, and of course it's a problem.
Yeah. And maybe if you're an individual, even if you're not in the industry, you should contact your representative and say, these are the genera of fish that I am interested in. This is why. This is the relative low impact they will have.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are specifics that we can say versus, please leave us alone.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And if you have a favorite fish, tell them about it,
Yeah.
you know.
Tell them the story, because, you know, well, obviously, y'all know that I'm all about the good story.
But they do need to know that there are people out here who care and who
Right.
these things are really important to
And
us.
they want to do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apologize for all the losers who would dump a fish out there. Everyone who's ever dumped a fish outside, you're a loser.
Yeah.
Apologize for them.
I actually have a statistic for that. So
Okay.
7% of fish keepers today have released a fish in the past.
7%.
Yes. So 7% of the hobby is definitively losers.
Right.
So, yeah.
I wouldn't even go that far. I mean, they, like your little 6-year-old has got this turtle.
Oh, don't humanize it, Alisha. We're on board with you here.
I would forgive them if they just, once they knew better, to not do it again.
I think that the way the Michigan law is written is pretty well done, and that is, if you don't know anything about the law and you release a fish into a stream, it's a $2,500 fine. If you know it's illegal, it's a $5,000 fine.
Okay.
Right? Which, oh, by the way, every single person out there listening just learned it is illegal to release something into the wild.
Haha.
But I think, that's, we have to regulate ignorance, but we also have to regulate, you did that even though you knew better? Yeah, that you're in even bigger trouble.
I actually have some quotes from you. I actually listened to some of our past podcasts.
Ooh.
And these were so good that I was
I'm
like,
about to get called out.
they need to come back.
All right.
If you don't know enough about it, you shouldn't sell it.
Yeah.
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 We need
Go to a big box store and ask them what country. Oh, so here's a fun one, right? 20 years ago, back when I was working in the trades, I was a trim carpenter, and we used to get into these big, huge discussions about fish with some of the people standing around because one person was interested, and I mentioned something about sharks, and he said, "Yeah, I used to have them in my aquarium." I said, "No, you didn't, because there are no freshwater sharks." Okay, technically you can call me out on that, but I'd like someone to do that because there are actually 2, maybe 3. Anyway, no freshwater sharks. He's like, "Really? No, I had a red-tailed shark." That's not a real shark. That's how the conversation went, right? And so I said, I treated him like he was an idiot for not knowing that was a real he thought it was a real shark. I treated him like he was stupid for not knowing that it wasn't a real shark. And he said, "All right, I'll make a bet with you." And we used to do beer bets all the time. It was a 6-pack bet. And he said, "Call the 3 big box stores and ask them if that is a real shark." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "If one of them says yes, you owe me a 6-pack." One of them said yes.
That was a terrible bet.
Fish manager at one of the big box stores said a red-tailed shark was a real shark.
That leads me into my next bed quote. We need to be okay with being in the hot seat.
Yes.
The industry as a whole
Yes.
has a disproportionate amount of power to help and harm the environment, and we cannot take that lightly.
Yes. Yes. We can do so much good. Red-tailed sharks are alive because of aquarists. I care about the environment, okay, for all kinds of reasons. But I care about aquatic ecosystems more because I'm an aquarist.
Mm-hmm. Who cares about some ditch halfway across the world?
Oh, wait, there's licorice
Aquarists
gardens in there?
do.
I care.
Yup.
Right. Okay, that's a good quote. Thank you.
And this is Jacques Cousteau, but people protect what they know and love.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
So educate yourself, educate your friends and family, educate your children, absolutely. Educate the people around you, even if it's authority, even if it's your store. I love when people tell me I'm wrong. 15-year-old kid told us we had a plant identified improperly the other day. Awesome. You get a sticker. You're my new number 1.
Yeah. And for God's sake, do it right.
Do it right. Jeez.
What do you think, guys? How did we do, Alisha?
I think you did great. I think your listeners will have some solid takeaways, and we can encourage them. Again, don't write to the forums, write to the people who can actually, affect the change that we want to see happen. Mm-hmm. This is an opportunity, not a challenge.
Yeah. Don't rage, educate.
Those are 2 good quotes. Write that down, Charles. An opportunity, not a challenge. Educate, don't. How'd you say it?
I said rage, don't rage, educate.
Don't rage, educate. Yeah, we need those. Those are cool.
That's actually like we should just write that on our palm. Because sometimes we need a reminder.
We do. It's true. So, I think our next topic is going to have to be another light one because
I'm tired.
I know, but we keep harping on this. And why are we under such scrutiny right now? It's because we screwed up a lot of things. And as aquarists, every single one of us has to take it personally that there are dojo loaches in a stream in Michigan. Every single aquarist has to take it personally that lionfish are devastating the damsel population in the Caribbean, which, oh, by the way, those are devastating the populations of good algae in the Caribbean, which are messing up the whole ecosystem. Every single aquarist has to take that personally and has to take it personally that as a result, we are going to be regulated in ways that we prefer not to be regulated.
And again, none of the species currently listed are, great aquarium species. And if this could prevent one lionfish, it's all worth it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just had a very vivid daydream of everyone pointing at a single lionfish being like, screw that guy.
I think the one quick point needs to be made on that, and then I think it's time to close, right? It's not the lionfish's fault.
It's true.
Yeah, that's
Right?
true too.
Lionfish are fantastic fish and very important parts of their own ecosystem, and they look amazing in aquariums. It is not their fault that everyone wants to and should kill every single one of them in the Caribbean. It's not their fault. But now we have to responsibly try and kill all of those creatures that ended up overpopulating in the Caribbean because of what aquarists did. Take that responsibility and take it personally.
Mm-hmm.
All those fish have to be murdered because of us.
All because of us. So somebody got a joke or something? Anyway, no. Let's
In the words of my favorite podcast ever, bye.
Oh, thank you for being here, Alisha. We needed you on this one.
We did, yes.
Really did.
For real. Thank you so much for being a guest and putting up with this crazy thing that we do here.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
This was really good and it was a lot of fun. Let's find another reason to have you on for really fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We'll figure
right.
something like that out. Otherwise, check us out on all of those social media stuff that Amy's going to bring
We're
up.
on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Watercolors Aquarium Gallery. We make it really easy on you. And if you want to find our podcast listeners group, it's Watercolors Aquarium Gallery Podcast Listeners on Facebook. So please send your pictures, stories, questions. It's been really fun to see you guys out there.
Thank you, Dr. Alisha Davidson, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Let's have lots of fun and keep those hands wet.